This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Now, Sports Bash Saturday. Here's Josh Hennig.
This was Pederson's pick. He and Press Taylor want to transform this offense. Gosh almighty, they scored 10 points against Seattle in the regular season, lost. Scored 10 points against Seattle in the postseason and lost. They need to be more dynamic and productive, and they need to be more reliable at the quarterback position. And Jalen Hurts does that for them.
That was ESPN Sal Paolantonio on the Sports Bash with Mike Gill yesterday, answering the exact question we asked last Saturday right here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you. We got a lot to get to today. As you just heard Sal Paolantonio say, Sal Paolantonio texted Doug Pederson. He spoke to Doug directly. He answered the question I asked all of you last week. When we talked about Jalen Hurts the very next day, the conversation I wanted to have and I was curious about was, what was Doug Pederson's influence on this decision? And according to Sal Paolantonio, and it has not been denied by anyone, there is not a single person in the media or if anyone from the Eagles has denied this statement. This was a Doug Pederson pick of Jalen Hurts. One of the things that gets overlooked in sports very, very often is that a lot of times we like to make decisions in our own mind about who is responsible for what, without realizing that even though it's a team sport, everyone's responsible. We want to say that Joe Montana won 4 Super Bowls, right? Michael Jordan won 6 NBA championships, but they didn't do it by themselves. Montana still had receivers to throw. Jordan still had teammates to pass to. The same thing with a team when they make a draft. Listen, there is a final decision maker, usually, whether that's the executive vice president of football operations, the general manager, the owner, like Jerry Jones in Dallas. He makes the final decisions on everything in that organization. You have a guy like John Lynch. He's the general manager. He makes the final decisions on football moves. Howie Roseman is the executive VP of football operations. He makes the official moves in the Eagles organization. But all of those people, whether we want to like it or not, are influenced, are moved, are spoken to from other people who say to them, this is what I think we should do. And to me, that's a good sign, though, that people would be willing to listen to somebody instead of running a dictatorship, saying, I'm right, everybody else is wrong. And Sal Paolantonio, and listen, Sal is one of the best reporters, and I'm so glad he's on the Sports Bash as much as he is because of the fact that, listen, you may not always agree with Sal's opinions about, that are subjective opinions, that are analysis, but his reporting is always elite because he has a direct relationship with Doug Pederson. This is what Sal Pal said about the decision-making in the Philadelphia Eagles organization.
This was Doug Pederson's pick. And the dynamic within that organization is they are co-equal partners, Roseman and Pederson. Roseman makes the final call, but he is not going to do anything that Pederson hasn't bought into. That's just not the way it is. Roseman owes Pederson, and Pederson owes Roseman for that Super Bowl trophy that's in his office that we saw on draft night.
So, again, I asked, was Jalen Hurts last week a Doug Pederson pick? And you've now heard Sal Paolantonio twice say it was. You've heard Sal Paolantonio say the decisions made in the Philadelphia Eagles organization, it is a part of both guys. It's co-decision makers because Howie and Doug are attached at the hip. So when we talk about the 2020 NFL draft, this is not just about Howie Roseman. This is about Doug Pederson telling everybody, I like Jalen Hurts. I think we should draft him. And I think that is a huge point we have to emphasize when we talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. Whether you like Jalen Reagor and Jalen Hurts, whether you like Davion Taylor, whether you like Kavon Wallace, whether you like any of the picks the Eagles made the 3 days last week, at the end of the day, all of those decisions were made by the organization. This is not just a Howie Roseman pick. And I know that's not a conversation that's sexy and fun to talk about because, and I will fight all of you on this point. You can come at me at 609-403-0973. You can tweet at me at Josh Hennig on Twitter. It is now far beyond time to admit that the success and failure of this football team falls at the feet of both Howie Roseman and Doug Pederson. You want to complain about these draft picks? You got to put it at Doug Pederson's feet too. Because Doug Pederson is supposed to be the guy, the chosen one of Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman. When Chip Kelly was fired and Jeffrey Lurie came downstairs to the press conference and told everybody that he wanted a head coach with emotional intelligence, that he wanted a certain type of style of offense, he wanted a certain style of coaching and offense and defense and front office and cohabitation and cooperation between the coaching staff and the front office. Doug Pederson was hired because of that vision. And now, years later, when we see the 2020 NFL Draft, it is an extension of that owner, the general manager, and the head before the 2016 season. Jalen Hurts was the guy the Eagles wanted. And how does that impact how we look at this team? It impacts it because the head coach believes that Jalen Hurts can bring something specific to the table. That he's more than just a developmental quarterback. That he can add things to the offense. That he can add things to the quarterback room. Apparently, Hurts and Wentz have hit it off very well since the draft because of their faith, because of their backgrounds, because of a lot of different, familiar things they have in common. They both come from families that are very strong in faith. They have come from backgrounds that are very strong in football. They both are guys that, have a lot of common themes in their lives. So there's a relationship already being developed there. The Eagles have talked about bringing people into the organization who are quality human beings. Well, is there anybody a bigger quality human being than Jalen Hurts? This guy is one of the few people that ever started as a freshman quarterback for Nick Saban in college football. He loses his job to Tua Tagovailoa, and instead of immediately transferring, stays in Alabama for a year to help the team. And if it wasn't for Jalen Hurts coming in to the SEC championship game for Tua in his final year in Alabama, a lot of people wonder if Alabama would have ever gotten to the national championship that year. Furthermore, Jalen Hurts goes to Oklahoma and gets them back to the college football national championship playoffs. Now, they didn't win the championship, but he got two different franchises as a quarterback to a high championship level. His father's a football coach. He's a hard worker. He's an exceptional athlete. For those who don't know, Jalen Hurts, his bench press and squat max and his deadlift is probably among the best of any quarterback on planet Earth right now. The dude is a physical phenomenon as an athlete. Does he have development to do? Of course. There's never been a quarterback outside of Andrew Luck that come out of college that didn't need specific and serious restructuring when it comes to how they approach the game mentally and physically on some level. Everyone needs help. Everyone needs work. Everyone needs to get better. But this idea that the Philadelphia Eagles should have never picked Jalen Hurts because you or somebody else thinks that they should have drafted a wide receiver or a linebacker or a safety or a corner. It's long beyond time that we differentiate between understanding why the Eagles do what they do and agreeing or disagreeing with it. Did I agree with them drafting Jalen Hurts in the second round? No. Do I understand it? Yes. Do I appreciate it? Absolutely. There are so many times that we look at sports and we don't treat sports properly. And part of it is because of the world we live in, fantasy football, video games, social media. We develop ideas and opinions that are not always based in reality. Yesterday on the Sports Bash, Mike Gill had Scott Lauber on. He covers the Philadelphia Phillies, Philadelphia Inquirer, longtime baseball writer. And he brought up a great point. He said, there are so many times that we forget that these athletes are human beings. There is a human element to building a football team that gets overlooked. There is no guarantee that if you would have drafted another player at that spot in the second round, that person would have been a good fit for the organization. That would have been the right human being for the organization. There is an incredible difference between a player who is talented and a player who's going to fit your organization. So many times when you look around the NFL and you say, man, look at that guy. He's not a great fit for that locker room, or he's blowing up the locker room, or they just didn't mesh well chemistry-wise. There is something to be said about the Philadelphia Eagles valuing certain people and certain skill sets. You heard some of the audio from Howie Roseman talking this past week on Pro Football Talk. Well, this is what Howie Roseman said to Mike Florio as well about the Eagles quarterback room. Take a listen.
I love Carson Wentz, man. I love Carson Wentz, and I love going to bed at night, putting my head on the pillow and knowing that we have a strong quarterback room. That to me makes me sleep better.
A strong quarterback room. So when the Philadelphia Eagles look at Jalen Hurts, it's not just because he's one thing or another. It's because of the reality that Jalen Hurts fits this organization's desires for their quarterback room, for their team chemistry, the relationship with the quarterback, etc. Carson Wentz had a great relationship with Nick Foles. He had a great relationship with Josh McCown. Now you bring in another guy who is another Christian. Carson Wentz is a well-known Christian. He talks about his faith a lot on social media. It's a well-known thing. You bring in another fellow believer for that quarterback room. Carson Wentz is comfortable with that. Do we really believe Carson Wentz would have been as okay with Nick Foles winning the Super Bowl and Nick Foles playing as many times as he did with the Eagles if him and Nick Foles didn't have a good relationship, if Nick Foles and him weren't kindred spirits in faith? Don't overlook the fact that some of these athletes are very, very judgmental of each other over things that maybe you and I don't care about. You may not care about what your coworker does outside of work. Whatever your job is, whether you're a FedEx driver, shout out to all the people making deliveries today. Whether you're working at a hospital or a medical center, thank you to all the medical care service workers out there. Whether you're a police officer, thank you for your service to our community. Whatever your job is, whatever you're doing right now in your life, there is something to be said for the relationships between people at work. And when you're a football player and you spend an ungodly amount of time together, your football team mates become your family. Your coaches, the guys in the locker room, you end up spending more time with them during a season than with your own immediate family. You got to be able to get along with these people. And there is something to be said for Carson Wentz getting along with his backups. There is something to be said for people getting along with each other. You have changed the dynamic of this organization. It was completely toxic at the end of the 2015 season. The environment around the organization and in the NovaCare Center was absolutely toxic. You bring in Doug Pederson to change the culture. You get rid of the bad apples like the Josh Huffs. You turn over the roster and bring in different people like Nick Foles. You win a Super Bowl. You go to the playoffs 3 straight years. Now you've let Malcolm Jenkins go, a huge leader in that locker room. Now we're looking to Wentz and Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox and Zach Ertz to take another step up in the absence of Malcolm Jenkins. You do not want to bring in somebody into that locker room who's going to be in any way disruptive. So you may say, well, they should have gone out and signed Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco, fill in the blank backup quarterback. But I can't promise you that any of those guys will get along well with Wentz or that Wentz will be happy with those people. When Press Taylor, the Eagles quarterback coach and now the offensive game passing coordinator or whatever his new fancy title is in the reformed Doug Pederson coaching staff, when he went to Oklahoma multiple times to meet with Jalen Hurts, there was a reason for that. There was a reason why the Eagles value this player. And it's more than just he was a good college player. The Eagles value the backup quarterback position, as Howie Roseman told Mike Florio this week on Pro Football Talk.
Listen, I could look you, I could look him, I could look anyone in the eye, hopefully face to face at some point soon, and tell you we love Carson Wentz. And we've shown it with our actions. We showed it when we traded everything to go and get him. We showed it when we went and paid him on that contract. And it's not like we're trying to get out of that contract. Like, we're committed to that. But we're trying to build a football team that has incredible depth, that we have this value of this backup quarterback position. You know, Jeffrey said, like, we want to have 2 of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league. Like, that's our goal. That's what we're trying to do.
The Eagles value the backup quarterback. They value who is in that quarterback room. They value the relationships of the people in that locker room. So the next time you or me want to criticize a move by a football team, by a basketball team, by the hockey team, by the baseball team, we have to remember that these are human beings. And the success and failure of a football team or any sports team goes far beyond the talent on the field. It has to do with the internal relationships. And I'm telling you right now, you can text me. We'll get your text in a minute. 609-403-0973. If you don't value the relationships of the people in that locker room, the fact that the Eagles want a good quarterback room and they want good quality people in their organization and they're looking for certain types of players and talent and fits, please let me know why that's a problem. Because as far as I'm concerned, that strategy, that emotional intelligence that Jeffrey Lurie talked about, that cooperation between the head coach and the GM that Jeffrey Lurie talked about, and Sal Palantonio just confirmed on the Sports Bash yesterday. The fact this was a Doug Pederson pick. These are all elements that lead up to the fact that you may like or disagree the picks the Eagles made, but you cannot honestly overlook the fact the Philadelphia Eagles value certain things. Now, whether those decisions turn out in the long run, well, we're going to find out. When we evaluate this draft 4 or 5 years from now, and when we talk about Rager, Hurts, Wallace, Taylor, when we talk about the 3 wide receivers they walked away with on day 3, the 2 draft picks, and then acquiring Marquise Goodwin in a trade. When we talk about the fact that the Philadelphia Eagles didn't move up in the draft or didn't do A, B, or C. When we talk about these things years from now, we can make judgments if they were the right decision. But as of right here, right now, they are the right decision. Because of the fact the Philadelphia Eagles, their emphasis and evaluation and what they prioritize is different than how you and I might build a roster. And I am not going to tell this organization that they made the wrong decision if their priority is people of certain quality and character, and their priority is making sure players fit within the team, in the scheme, and the organization in the locker room over a guy's 40-time bench press or any combine stat. Stats are just numbers. These are human beings. These are people who have to get along and work together. And if the Eagles are trying to foster an environment of unity and togetherness in a world where we're basically all separated from each other, and the Philadelphia Eagles want to turn around and say that we are the only team in the NFC East with the same head coach and coaching structure and offense and defense from last year, this year, we want to amplify that continuity, then doggone it, I'm not going to sit here and tell them they made the wrong decision. I may not agree with it, but I'm not going to condemn them. I'm going to let it play out.